Pangaea Group is proud to be a founding sponsor of the 14th National Pharmaceutical Congress. As Canada's trusted, established, and reliable partner to pharma, Pangaea enables people to positively impact the Canadian healthcare system for the well-being and health of Canadians. Pangaea delivers on this purpose through diverse experience, an extensive network, and close partnerships that accumulate the knowledge and insights needed to effectively enable strategy for our clients. Plus, we don't just say, we also do, by helping many of our clients execute strategies across various functions. Driven by our people, the Pangaea team is sought after as a collection of efficient thought leaders and connectors from many corners of industry dedicated to providing timely, innovative, and accessible solutions for our clients. I encourage you to stop by for virtual coffee by reaching us at info@pangaeaconsultants.com or read more on our blog at pangaeaconsultants.com. Thanks to our clients for 25 years of partnership in helping you succeed. Enjoy the conference.
Good morning. Welcome to the Spring 2021 webinar of the National Pharmaceutical Congress. I'm Mitch, Shannon in Toronto, and I'd like to thank you for taking some time for us this morning. You will not be bored for the next 60 minutes as we learn about how to navigate pharma's post-COVID roadmap. It's been exactly 50 weeks since we held the first virtual NPC webinar, and if you're counting, 19 months since the last in-person Congress back in October 2019. For those of you who may have forgotten what it was like back in the days when we would meet in the real world each year at the Mississauga Convention Center, our team has recorded a short video clip from the 2019 event so we can briefly relive those days. Would you like to see it? Here we are.
¡Qué divertido! ¡Graciosísimo!
Wasn't it nice to see all those familiar faces again? I'm reminded of how we lost our damage deposit at the Mississauga Convention Center that year. However, our group this morning is by far the largest ever assembled for any NPC event during the past 15 years. And that's a tribute to our exciting speakers and the vital topic, as well as the current focus all of us have in the life sciences on pivoting, on adapting to change. One practical question that we always have during these events is, who else is in the room? Rather than keep you wondering about who else is here, let's just take a quick look at the data, which you'll now see on your screen. More than 80% of you work in the pharma or biotech industry, with the rest from allied fields. And as you'd expect, there's a full spectrum of different responsibilities, with customer-facing personnel at the top of the list. Does that reflect some uncertainty about how those jobs might be reassessed post-COVID? Yeah, I'm guessing it does. So this next one is interesting. There are more of you from right across the country at this meeting than at any previous NPC we've done. There's also a decent representation from the USA and from around the world. That speaks to the new reality of remote work, and that thought might set up some of the discussion for later this morning. So finally, this breakdown of delegates' job titles shows that experienced pharma personnel, not just newbies, have successfully transitioned to the digital workspace, or at least got their kids to set up Zoom for them. And now that you know what kind of company you're going to be keeping for the next hour, let's get started. Before I hand things over to our friend Ben Parry, I'll just let you know that if you need any assistance during this meeting, just use the icon on the bottom of your screen to raise your virtual hand, and one of the Chronicle staff will be over to give you some assistance. Feel free to pose questions to our faculty at any point by clicking on the Q&A icon. If you need a copy of the pre-read document that all delegates were sent, which contains the agenda, faculty bios, and background reading, the link will be on the bottom of your screen at various points through the webinar. So click on that and you'll have the document. On the agenda today, you'll hear about direct-to-consumer promotion this morning. And I want to let you know that later you'll be learning about a new learning opportunity through Chronicle Academy to sign up for our certificate learning program on DTC marketing for pharma executives. More about that later. Right now, we're going to acknowledge our partners. They are the sponsors who allow us to bring you today's event. We're going to take 30 seconds to show our appreciation to those great companies, and then Mr. Parry will pick up the baton. I'll be back later. Meanwhile, enjoy the conference. Thanks for coming.
Thank you to the sponsors of the NPC Spring webinar. Their support means this special event continues to be open to everyone, without charge. Thanks to Chronicle Companies, the Pangaea Group, Innomar Strategies, MReach Incorporated, Healthing.ca, Imprez Incorporated, No Fixed Address, O'Day Peak Pharma Solutions, Pharma Consultants, and Torys LLP. These are your leaders in the Canadian life sciences.
Thanks, Mitch, and welcome everybody. I can say you're in for a real treat today as we have three esteemed panelists helping us to shape the dialogue on the what, why, and how of navigating pharma's post-COVID roadmap. Our all-star cast today includes Brian Heath, Vice President and General Manager of Amgen Canada, Marissa Poole, General Manager at Sanofi-Genzyme and Sanofi Canada Country Lead, and Eileen McMahon, Partner and Chair of Intellectual Property and the Food and Drug Regulatory Practices at Torys LLP. You'll enjoy hearing from Brian to kick off the discussion today. He will be engaging us in the dialogue of what's needed to build resiliency in the post-COVID era at the health system level and with government. Brian's passion and contributions to the future of Canadian healthcare runs deep through his board memberships of both Innovative Medicines Canada and the Advanced Coronary Treatment Foundation, where Brian collaborates to establish free CPR and defibrillator training programs for students in high schools across Canada. Recognized by Pharmaceutical Executive with 3 Doctor's Choice Awards, it's a pleasure to have Brian join us today. Building on Brian's presentation, Marissa will share perspectives regarding how important collaboration and communication will be in the post-COVID journey and considerations for where we need to interact differently. Marissa exemplifies thought leadership in pharma and is an inspiring leader who consistently gives back through numerous avenues of mentorship in the healthcare setting, including Innovative Medicines Canada as a board member. Marissa is talented and thoughtfully engaging stakeholders in a diversity of topics ranging from gender balance to how pharmaceutical innovation contributes to the health system. We're grateful to have Marissa back to the NPC stage. Progressing the dialogue to include the patient today, the Canadian patient, will be Eileen, who will be discussing some history as to why Canadian patients do not have direct access to information, the interactions with pharma, and related considerations as patients' needs evolve in the post-COVID environment. A truly authentic leader, Eileen is sought after as a leading legal advisor and counsel in the areas of intellectual property, regulatory, domestically and abroad. Eileen is highly recognized within the global legal community as a thought leader, leading lawyer, and star. It's wonderful to have Eileen with us again at NPC today. So to set the stage for our presenters, we have a few poll questions to warm up the discussion. So we'll get you started with that. And if I can just have the first poll question come up, we'll get you warmed up to the concept here. So first question, when do you think golf courses will legally reopen in Ontario? I've heard some people say that they classified themselves golf courses under playgrounds, but I don't think that's quite flying the radar. But would it be May 24th weekend, first day of summer, June 20th, Canada Day weekend, or a summer without golf? Shoot me. I'll give you a moment to answer the question there. Okay, how's it looking? First day of summer. That would be a good way to kick off the summer for many. Wonderful. All right, let's jump into keep you getting into the exercise mode here. Question number 2. What will cause the biggest change to the operating environment for innovative medicines after the pandemic? Evolution of regulatory and access policy, evolution of pharma biotech industry engagement with healthcare providers, evolution of pharma biotech industry engagement with patients, or other? Let us know your thoughts. Okay, we'll see what the real results here. Interesting. Evolution of pharma biotech. Very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, let's continue on with a few questions here. In what area is the pharma biotech industry most prepared for in the post-pandemic environment? Regulatory and access policy, engagement with healthcare providers, engagement with patients, or other? Let us know your thoughts there. This is an interesting one. Fascinating. All right, regulatory and access policy. Interesting stats. And a couple more to go here, just to get you fully warmed up. After the pandemic, what healthcare system policies do you expect to change the most? Investment in telemedicine, integration and sharing of healthcare data, value-based procurements, preventative medicine, accelerated and expanded access to health innovation, or public-private collaboration? Investment in telehealth. Oh, fascinating. Some good feedback, everybody. It's interesting to see the audience's impressions. Okay, next question for us, and we're almost there. What percentage of customer engagements do you anticipate will remain virtual in a post-COVID world? 80 to 100%. We've rocked it from home and we're staying put for the most part. 50 to 79. We'll see a few customers, but contact with the majority will be virtual. 20 to 49% will be more targeted with in-person meetings going forward, or 0 to 19, hitting the road and staying there as soon as my team is able. Fascinating. 20 to 49% will be more targeted in-person meetings going forward. Great feedback from the team. All right, last question. Because of the pandemic, many Canadians have lost confidence in communications from governments. Is this the time for Canada to allow manufacturers to advertise prescription drugs directly to Canadians? Yes or no? Let's hear it. Oh, pretty close split there. A little bit on the fence with that one. Very cool to see the impressions of the audience there. So thanks for sharing. I hope you found value in that as well. So that was great feedback from the audience overall, and we're interested to see the various perspectives, which will nicely set us up as we get into the QA on the back end of our session. So with that, I'm going to welcome Brian to the stage as our first speaker. Brian, welcome, and over to you.
Hey, well, thank you, Ben, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk about building resilient healthcare systems in a post-crisis era, to talk about what advocacy for our industry means as healthcare leaders after this crisis and in the new world. So I was asked to address the issues around navigating policy when we come out of the pandemic and what this environment may look like as it proceeds. And my goal today is to set out a case for a new policy approach toward health innovations, and one that will help bring about a more resilient healthcare system. So you think about COVID-19, it's accelerated everything. It's fast forwarded by about a decade in all sorts of areas of our lives, the least of which is healthcare and technology. It's been also a catalyst for essential discussions around building resilience, one which is able to absorb such shocks without the unintended collateral damage. And there's a window of opportunity for us as healthcare sector leaders to engage in policy discussions with the government and offer our expertise in strengthening the health system, even through significant economic challenges to come. As the worst pandemic in a century, COVID-19 has had a major and a durable impact on the Canadian healthcare system and also on our economy. And health system leaders have been forced to confront numerous interconnected challenges, from protecting the vulnerable and treating the sick to modifying and reconfiguring institutions, systems, and technologies to treat the disease, all the way to designing and implementing the new public health protocols that are shaping the lives of millions of citizens. Beyond the direct impacts of the pandemic, COVID-19 also worsened challenges that existed before the virus. It's led to more hallway healthcare, longer wait times for many elective surgeries, and serious treatment disruptions for cancer patients. According to a survey done by the Canadian Cancer Survivors Network, the pandemic heightened anxieties and concerns of patients and also caregivers. And we've learned that about 54% report that their cancer treatments may have been delayed and or canceled as a result of COVID-19 precautions. According to a study in the British Journal of Surgery published in May of 2020, Canada was projected to have nearly 400,000 elective surgeries canceled or delayed due to the pandemic, which created a backlog that could take years to clear. Here in Canada, Canadian Medical Association Journal study found that between March 15th and June 13th of 2020, the backlog in Ontario alone was 150,000 surgeries, which was estimated to take 1.5 years to clear. So clearing this backlog not only requires increased resources, but also innovative approaches and new ways to manage patients. The bottom line is we must do things differently. For many years in Canada, we've talked about health system sustainability. Now, sustainability is the advocacy word of the past, and it's defined as the ability to be maintained at a certain rate or level. In healthcare, unfortunately, this has become synonymous with cost containment, or the idea that we must do more with less. And what we've witnessed in recent months is that the hyper-focus on cost containment has left very little flexibility to respond to the surges in demand arising from the pandemic. In essence, our system didn't have the resilience that it needed. Now, health system resilience has been defined as the capacity of health actors, institutions, and populations to prepare for and effectively respond to crises, maintain core functions when a crisis hits, and, informed by lessons learned during the crisis, reorganize if conditions require it. So we envision a healthcare system that's built around patient outcomes and enhanced use of health technologies. This would be enabled by collaborative, data-driven models of care focused on outcomes and value. And in the long term, such a system would not only meet future challenges, but have the capacity to withstand unintended consequences as we have seen. Health systems need to move toward a predict and prevent model of managing diseases. The current break and fix focus of our health system places the majority of our resources on treating health events, as opposed to preventing these events from happening in the first place. As Canada's population ages and more are living with chronic diseases that require costly long-term care, we need to address preventative care that keeps patients out of hospitals, helps predict disease progression, and helps to save costs down the road. And that's why we're calling for collaboration to bring about a system that encourages value-based care and delivers effective healthcare for generations to come. So COVID disproportionately impacted patients with non-communicable diseases, and it highlights the importance of prevention and treatment in order to mitigate morbidity and mortality from future system shocks. Adoption of innovation and health technology has the ability to further reduce the burden of disease and build the population's resilience to shocks. So let me give a few examples of what we're talking about. Patients with uncontrolled diabetes have a higher risk of COVID-19, higher risk of COVID-19 hospitalization and death than those without diabetes. Amgen commissioned a study that looked at how adoption of medicines for diabetes led to an estimated averted 17,000 hospital admissions, 2,700 ICU admissions, and 400 hospital deaths in the UK. And the full report will be released at a later date. In addition, we've seen disruptions in cancer care, we've seen missed screenings and delayed diagnoses, and these will inevitably result in substantial increases in late-stage cancer and possibly avoidable cancer deaths. We can therefore expect an increase in the need for more advanced cancer therapy, and timely access to the best therapies will be critical. Now, COVID-19 uncovered long-standing and pervasive systemic problems within the Canadian healthcare system. And a policy window for bold governmental action has opened up for broad conversations on redefining the value of healthcare to build a resilient system. Canada has a unique opportunity to rethink and rework our healthcare systems, to challenge customs and norms, and to push for new models of care, enhance collaboration, innovative approaches, and improved outcomes. And in order to do this, policymakers must address these key issues. Includes building public health systems that are faster, more agile, and more proactive, accelerate and expand access to health innovation, such as treatments, integrate and share healthcare data, and optimize and extend virtual care. Also break down silos between governments and ministries, departments, and then use the predict and prevent model to guide investments and to anticipate and reduce waste. It can incorporate value-based procurements and decision-making for access, and they can work with the private sector to identify the most pressing care gaps and develop solutions. I hope that moving forward as an industry and as healthcare sector leaders, we'll be talking about building resilience into our healthcare system. We'll be focused on the value of our medicines, not just the costs or the sustainability. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this panel today. I look forward to the discussion, and I'm going to turn the time now to Marissa. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Brian, for your insights on building a resilient Canadian healthcare system and navigating policy in the post-COVID world. I'm going to build on this and shift the discussion to speak about collaboration and resilience also, but in the context of the evolving nature of external communications in our next normal, and focus on what has changed when it comes to how we engage with external audiences. As we are all fully aware, the impact of COVID has been significant across the healthcare system. And if we look at how the delivery of care has changed, it's also indicative of a fundamental shift in how, as an industry, we need to continue to evolve to maintain meaningful engagements if we are to keep our customers and patients at the core of what we do. We all recognize that the impact of the pandemic will be lasting, and we see how many changes will remain as we look to our future state. As many healthcare visits shifted to virtual, patients have also started to adopt more technology to support managing their conditions. Nearly half of patients have started to use new devices or apps to manage their condition. But with the proliferation of content now available to patients, a significant proportion, 62% in the study of patients, have said that they are overwhelmed by that information. Looking to the future, patients who have appreciated the benefits of virtual care, limited travel time, more convenience for their schedules, will want to continue to receive virtual care, and it's anticipated that demand for these services will increase. Pharma engagements have continued predominantly through virtual means, with currently about 90% of interactions being conducted virtually, which compares to about 10% pre-COVID. Importantly, healthcare providers have reported that the information and services that companies started to offer during the pandemic were of higher value than before COVID-19. They saw increased value in communications beyond product information and providing support that met their most pressing needs. As we look to the future of engagements, there are indicators that some of the restrictions will be here to stay. In a study conducted by Accenture, 28% of HCPs stated that they would be likely to continue to restrict access to their medical offices post-COVID. and the vast majority felt an ideal state would be either all virtual or a mix of virtual and in-person engagements. So what are the trends instrumental in shaping the future of how we engage and communicate? We have and will continue to see an increased reliance on virtual care. COVID was a catalyst for a quick adoption of digital health technologies, and in particular, there will be a focus in the shift to telemedicine for the follow-up appointments with patients, ongoing monitoring of chronic conditions, and supporting treatment adherence. In terms of how industry will interact, we will see a hybrid approach. Digital and remote engagements are here to stay and will be complemented by in-person interactions. The benefit of digital allows an expanded reach and ability to connect with more customers. How those interactions are shaped needs to be developed with a platform-first approach and tailored to the technology being used. We have seen and will continue to see enhanced cross-functional partnerships. Virtual platforms make it easier to include resources from medical, from market access, or other subject matter experts to engage and enhance the value during a remote call. Shifting a mindset from a one-to-one relationship to having the field teams facilitate, or I like to say orchestrate, interactions with a broader team of resources will help continue to drive the value customers are seeking. And personalization will be key. While virtual platforms are providing a more efficient way of connecting, expectations for more tailored communications that deliver against the customer or patient needs are becoming more important and frankly expected. Deeper understanding and insights will be required to shape communications, so this is seen as a value add and does not contribute to the sense of overwhelming information. Navigating the evolving needs of our customers will require resilience, a shift in mindset, and new go-to-market models of engagement. 3 areas that will be critical to support this evolution include field orchestration. Our field roles will need to continue to evolve to fuel more meaningful customer engagement strategies, and how unique customer insights and time spent physically off territory can be repurposed to architecting more targeted engagement strategies. Companies must empower their field teams to be the centerpiece of the HCP experience at a time when pressures on capacity and access demand more precision and relevance than ever. With peer-to-peer orientation, the focus is to drive deeper advocacy and amplify messages by enabling more customer-to-customer interactions. By leveraging platforms that enable this, there is the ability to reach more customers, including, for instance, international opinion leaders, and supports development of KOL influencers. And digital outreach will continue to be a critical complement. Engagement is led and orchestrated by an omni-channel decision-making engine across non-face-to-face channels. This is cost efficient. It allows broader reach with low touch points, which can align with customer interests, and promotes finding non-visited HCPs with high interest. While this evolution of engagement and go-to-market models affords many opportunities, there are also some areas and potential pitfalls that require careful consideration. The first of these is that relevance requires quality over quantity. Efficient virtual communication broadens reach, but content must be relevant and tailored. While new messages are welcomed, healthcare providers are also receiving high volumes of digital content that in some cases is less relevant and missing the mark. We will need to continue to coach our talent through this change. We need to build teams for rapid innovation, for flexibility and resilience. And we should anticipate that there will be talent and operational impacts. New promotional models require changes to the processes and capabilities underpinning them, and pre-pandemic ways of working will require revisiting. Understanding and planning for how customers are targeted, how field teams are incentivized, and how new competencies and skills are embedded all require a thoughtful and coordinated approach. And we need to assess digital readiness to deliver against the personalized approach that is required. This includes optimizing MCE strategy and leveraging analytics to deliver a customized needs-based approach. This is also a time where we can pilot new engagement approaches and ensure we are continuously benchmarking. Companies that set the standard for new customer engagement will be agile, digitally savvy, and commercially precise. I wanted to close by highlighting the opportunity that we have as an industry in reframing and reinforcing our relevance, our value, how we are critical to the economic recovery of Canada, by how we engage and communicate with our external stakeholders going forward. Opportunities exist in how we create partnerships and build relationships, for example, with digital health innovators to deliver new solutions that enable the healthcare provider to continue to support the evolving patient and healthcare journey. In expanding patient support services that matter, extending practical support to deliver care as close to the patient as possible, for instance, from supporting in-home treatments and testing to providing details about lab locations and care sites so patients can save time and reduce travel to access care. This is something we have been very focused on across our therapeutic areas at Sanofi-Genzyme. By reevaluating our messages and value propositions to focus on key information that drives more impact in a post-COVID world, such as highlighting the ease of administration and the ability to maintain adherence through virtual means. And finally, by recognizing the importance of empathy in respecting the human impact of the pandemic, understanding the implication of delays in diagnoses and treatment, financial aspects and impact to patients, health inequities that have been exacerbated, and ongoing mental health challenges. How we engage, communicate, and partner as an industry is vital to the resilience of our healthcare system and provides clear opportunities to demonstrate the value and benefits that we bring, with patients at the center of everything that we do. Thank you very much for the opportunity to provide my thoughts and perspectives, and I look forward to discussing more during our Q&A. And with that, I will turn it over to Eileen.
Thank you, Marissa. And I'd also like to thank the National Pharma Congress, Pangaea, and Chronicles for inviting me to speak this morning. I've been asked to speak about direct-to-consumer advertising of prescription drugs in Canada. So what I'd like to cover in our time together is, what is direct-to-consumer advertising of prescription drugs? Is it based on law or policy? Can you advertise prescription drugs directly to consumers? What is the position of other countries, for example? In Canada, direct-to-consumer advertising of prescription drugs has been prohibited since 1955. So over 65 years, there has been this prohibition. It's law-based, it's not policy, it's law-based, and it's right in the Food and Drug Regulations. The version that we have is the first version that appears on this slide, section C.01.044 of the Food and Drug Regulations. You can see that it prohibits a person from advertising a prescription drug to the general public, except for name, price, and quantity. So that's the loophole, or that's what you can do: name, price, quantity, not indication, not disease state plus the name of the drug, etc. Now, interestingly, if we look back to the version before 1978, the Food and Drug Regulations had a much broader prohibition: no advertising of a Schedule F drug to the general public. Schedule F drug being prescription drugs in those days. So the reasons behind the prohibition were that a number of legislators felt that giving consumers access to that information could well drive up demand, could result in alarm being felt that if I have this particular disease, I need to take this drug. And there are various other reasons that the law was put in place back in 1955. There was a challenge to the law. So CanWest, a media company in the 2000s, brought a charter challenge saying that this prohibition violated the freedom of expression provision in the charter. The litigation has been suspended indefinitely. So we don't have a ruling on the constitutionality. The case has been suspended. In view of our current law, what is legal and what is illegal? As I mentioned before, if I were to say, take Lipitor for indication X, that would be illegal if I say that directly to consumers. However, I can name a drug and then provide a humorous caption around a particular drug. So that is legal. Another thing that is legal, of course, is indicating disease state and communicating information about disease state without reference to a particular drug. Help-seeking advertisements are also legal. So if you have disease X, please speak with your physician for options. I want to mention vaccines because vaccines can be advertised to consumers. They are not prescription drugs, and that's why you will see advertisements and communications to consumers around vaccines. So let's talk about some advertisements that do happen in Canada. Well, the famous group of advertisements, of course, those relating to Viagra, very humorous. The ones that I think about are the series called Apologies, where a fellow apologizes to his buddies that he can't go away for a hunting weekend because he has other things to do. So very humorous connotations, and people know that the advertisements were about Viagra, and they know about the indication, but nothing was mentioned. We talked about help-seeking advertisements, and of course, ex-Canada advertisements happen in Canada. So if they originate outside of Canada, Health Canada and our government do not have jurisdiction over those advertisements. And so you will see US-based advertisements, for example, spilling over into Canada. So what's Health Canada's role then? Well, it does review and consider complaints regarding direct-to-consumer advertising. They act quickly if they believe that there's a safety issue or if an advertisement is false, misleading, or deceptive. That's right in our Food and Drugs Act, that those kinds of advertisements are prohibited. And you'll see the statistics there in terms of how many advertisements they reviewed and closed last year. It really is complaints driven though. They don't have the bandwidth to review all advertisements. And so complaints can come in from consumers, physicians, other stakeholders, and Health Canada will investigate them more quickly if they regard there to be a safety issue. The other policy that's very helpful is one that Health Canada puts out on the distinction between advertising and other activities. And so certain activities are regarded as legal because they're not advertisements, they're not promotions. So a press release, for example, would not be regarded as an advertisement, or a communication regarding disease states and options regarding the disease state, or speaking to physicians regarding disease state options. So there are a variety of different activities that are not regarded as promotional, not regarded as advertising. So what about preclearance? What about preclearance of prescription drug advertising? Well, we have the Pharmaceutical Advertising Advisory Board, and this would be a preclearance function for advertisements of prescription drugs to physicians. There's the PAB code, it's voluntary, though IMC members state that all members will provide their advertising to PAB for review. We also have Advertising Standards Canada, and their role is to review the ads that are legal and that go directly to consumers. So for example, an advertisement relating to name, price, or quantity of a drug, or a disease state advertisement, call your doctor advertisement, vaccine advertisement, drugs that are OTC, for example. These are all the types of advertisements that ASC will review. There's a very handy visual on the ASC website, a flow chart that describes when advertisements go to PAB, when advertisements go to Health Canada, and when advertisements stay at ASC for review. It's a very handy visual if you want to download it and keep it handy. So stakeholders, you can imagine this is a highly charged issue. You know, consumers have some positions, physicians others, manufacturers different positions. The government, of course, has a position on this issue. It's been so entrenched in Canada, though. You know, we've had this since 1955. And I found it interesting to see on the Canadian Medical Association, its position. It was published in 2002, but was updated as recently as 2020. So they revisit its position on this particular issue regularly. And their position is that information about drugs that is balanced, that is a good thing. So in other words, if there's objective, evidence-based, plain language information that goes to consumers, they support those kinds of communications, but they oppose direct-to-consumer advertisements. What do they say about that? They say that those types of advertisements are marketing rather than communicating of information. Furthermore, they worry that such advertisements might not provide enough information about other products or therapies that would be available to the consumer. They're concerned that it might strain the relationship between the patient and the healthcare provider. And last, they cite as a concern the cost of healthcare and that such advertisements might drive up the cost. So you can see it's a highly charged issue with different stakeholders having different positions and views. If we were to change the law, it's not a simple policy change. So you can see here the detail that's required to change a regulation, going first through Canada Gazette Part 1 for comment, and later Canada Gazette Part 2 with lots of steps in between. US allows direct-to-consumer advertisements. I'm not going to go into detail here, but I've provided the type of ad you can see in the United States and the parameters around such advertisements of prescription drugs. New Zealand also allows direct-to-consumer advertisements of prescription drugs. Europe does not since 2004. So now I'm going to turn it back to you, Ben. Thank you kindly. Look forward to our Q&A session.
Many thanks, Eileen, and thanks again for those presentations. We're going to take a moment. We're going to go into an innovation spotlight on a couple organizations in terms of what's out there for innovation in the marketplace. But what I encourage you to do is, while we're watching those, put your questions down in the Q&A section. It's directly below. You can see the Q&A button, and throw your questions in for the panel. We'll be coming back right after the innovation spotlights to open up the Q&A. So we'll take a moment. We'll jump into our innovation spotlight. Stay tuned.
The pharma industry is changing faster than ever before. Organizations are facing challenges in today's landscape that are putting their top line and bottom line at risk. With new customer engagement needs and technology evolving at the speed of light, the need for agility is more important than ever. With over 15 years of healthcare experience, Impress delivers a wide range of best-in-class services that are specifically tailored to ensure our partners can adapt and excel in a rapidly changing market. We are experts at exceeding sales objectives and providing our partners with a significant competitive advantage. Whether the need is agility and speed, maximizing top and bottom line, introducing new skill sets, or risk mitigation, Impress stands ready to help. We are Canada's next generation commercial partner, and we are ideally positioned to continue to help our partners thrive in the months and years to come. To learn more, visit www.impress.com.
right, we're back. So I'd like to invite Marissa and Brian to the stage. Eileen is going to join us hopefully momentarily as well. Oh, there's Eileen, wonderful, good. Pleasure to see you all. Thanks for joining the panel today. Really great to see all of you. Wonderful presentations. Thanks for inspiring the debate on this. We're going to jump into some Q&A here. So thanks again for joining in the hot seat as we go forward here and inspire some debate on these topics. So I think what I'll do is I'll start off. We've got some questions that have come in. Brian, I'll start with you. One of the questions that came in was the policy considerations that you put forward in many ways have been around for some years. Why are we still trying to make these happen? And what's different in the current environment to make these really needed to be there?
Ben, well, first of all, thank you for including me in the panel discussion today. And it's a pleasure to be with Marissa and Eileen and to have so many joining us for the call. And I appreciate the questions, and I appreciated actually the feedback coming in on the survey questions that you presented beforehand. It was interesting to me looking at the way we responded to those. I think it's interesting to think about which of the policy considerations most people felt the government was likely to implement and take action on, and that was in telehealth. That one I think came up with 50% of the participants today noting that as an issue. To the point of this question, telehealth is actually not new, and the technology has been around for quite a while. So the thing that's changed, of course, is the context. And so while these policy considerations are not necessarily new ideas, I think the concept of resiliency has become more at the forefront. The context has changed dramatically. And the policies are always a reflection of the context in which they operate. And the context that has taken place is it's fast forwarded us 10, 15 years. And so I would say that the cement is not dry and it's not solid. It's still forming and it's moving. And we're presented with a really important opportunity and moment to try to influence and shape the way policy is actually implemented and viewed. The second part, not only is the context changing, I think some of these policy initiatives that have been around for a while are working. They're taking shape, they're taking action. So, a perfect example is around our government's move to try to accelerate access to the vaccine here in Canada. So they have shown that they have bypassed some of the typical assessments that are taken and some of the typical steps that might usually be followed to bring access to the vaccine here in Canada. And I think that's a recognition that we need health innovation and we need health technology to sort out some of the problems that we're facing. I think they've also shown that they're willing to spend more money to address this healthcare crisis. And they've shown that they have sort of shown their cards, for lack of a better word, around what they truly value around good health and public health and what they're willing to spend for that. And so we would be silly to think that we shouldn't be engaging with them and partnering with them to provide solutions that are going to address the current situation and context that we're in.
Yeah, thanks for that, Brian. Well said. And I maybe open it up to Marissa or Eileen if there's any kind of aspects as you're looking at similar type of environment. Marissa, one of the areas that came forward here is, as you presented some of the plan that you put forward, one of the questions came forward was a lot needs to be done according to the plan that you'd suggested. Where do you see some of the priorities and some of the order of how that might play out when you think about the aspects of your presentation?
Thanks, Ben, and thank you for the question. I think if the pandemic has taught us anything, that's prioritization is critical in what we do going forward. I think the key components are intertwined, so it's hard to kind of order them 1, 2, and 3. As we think about what's going to be critical to successful engagement and communication in the future, ensuring that we truly understand the insights, whether it be of patients, whether it be of payers or our government stakeholders, and certainly of our healthcare providers. That's going to be critical. You know, how has their healthcare journey changed in terms of how they're treating patients, to ensure that we can meet their needs. So insights and analytics, more important than ever, I would say. Clearly, the talent that we have then to be able to communicate, and we saw the survey results, you know, we're all predicting, well, most of us, that 50% of interactions are going to be virtual from here on. So how do we adapt our organizations, whether that be from a structure perspective, whether that means upskilling the talent that we have, whether that's new roles, I think is critically important to address the future going forward. And having a flexible and agile workforce that can really pivot and adapt to the needs of the customers is important. And then clearly the digital piece. You know, we've seen that accelerate through the pandemic, and ensuring that we have the skills, the platforms to be able to leverage that and do it in a meaningful way. So we're not overwhelming our customers with information, that it is targeted to their needs.
Yeah, no, that's fair points all around. And Eileen, you know, just bridging on to what Marissa's saying there, we talk about digital. You spoke a little bit about, you know, what the patient lens is looking like and how that's evolving. How can the internet be leveraged to communicate with patients about prescription drugs?
Yes, well, we're at a time where information is helpful to consumers. The difficulty I think we're facing is that the information that consumers can get can often be conflicting. The information they might receive from the media versus from politicians versus from healthcare providers. Certainly information is helpful, especially if the consumer feels that they can rely upon the information. We spoke about what information can legally be provided to consumers, and there definitely are a number of options. As I mentioned, the direct-to-consumer information of a product or disease awareness type of information is permissible. And of course, the internet can be used for patients who are already on medicines, already on medications, and who need some support in terms of their medications, how to administer, what types of side effects they might have, numbers to call, that type of thing, Ben. Yeah,
it's great points. You know, as we think about that, and as we think about the moving towards that value-based healthcare system, you know, and if we translate that all back, Brian, I'll bring you back into the conversation here, because I think you brought up some big themes here, and some of the questions that are coming through that people are interested in talking about is, how do you bring those stakeholders together? How do you, like, what is the inflection point, and where do you start with that? Because I think you raised some important points there. So what do you think is the biggest barrier to kind of getting to next level, although we've seen, to your point, a great collaboration already starting because of the precipice of COVID?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is that there's this unique balance between trying to address the current situation as it stands with immediate solutions, with trying to prepare for the future and think about what types of systemic changes we would all want to see take place to prevent something from happening and to address some of the secondary healthcare crisis issues that have resulted from the handling of the pandemic. So, you know, we've seen, at least at Innovative Medicines Canada, I would say, also at Amgen, an increased ability to engage with a broader and much larger set of healthcare stakeholders by virtue of the virtual technology. So an engagement with a stakeholder in the past might require a full day, for example, by the time you worked in travel and pre-meeting preparation and logistics, and you know, travel after the meeting, just a limited number of time slots available. That made it more difficult to be having the kinds of dialogue and engagement that's necessary to really advance a policy and partnership. Now with you know, the Zoom and WebEx and all sorts of other virtual meeting technologies, we found that we can have short format engagements much more quickly, much more efficiently, and that engagement has increased dramatically. I don't think that we're at a point yet where we're able to really use data to help inform some of the decision making. But we're at a tipping point that is going to allow that to a much greater extent. And COVID's a great example, right? We're at a point where we're measuring the disease on a daily basis, the incidence, the prevalence, the recovery times, the mortality, right? We're measuring vaccinations on a daily basis. And these data are able to inform public health decision-making in ways that we've never seen before, globally or in Canada. And I think it speaks to the potential for us to be much more involved from a public and a private partnership standpoint, to look at data, look at what we're observing, and then come together to partner around potential solutions. And I think we're at the very beginning of this, but we'll have to step up to the plate and do our part, because it's not going to happen unless we show up prepared to have these discussions with the data and the evidence.
Yeah, that's great. And, you know, Marissa, springing on that, we've got the semblance of, as we think about that digital interaction that's happening all around us, and the level of, you know, the potential of that balance of face-to-face versus digital. You know, how do you see the stakeholders coming together on that to recognize that, you know, there is a semblance of a new norm here, and how is that going to, how are people going to be able to find ways to operate that organizationally, but also as an industry?
So I think we really need to think through what that looks like in the future, Ben. You know, we've seen, as Brian pointed out, you know, more stakeholders are able to come to the table in a virtual setting, and I think that's critically important. And that includes patients, and that includes patient advocacy groups as well, because their voice is critical. So I think, you know, we have to leverage the expertise of the individuals that really have a stake in this going forward. I think that's critically important. And then I think we need to, as an industry, think about evolution of our workforce and our capabilities and skills to actually meet those needs as well. So I know there's been a lot of work done and some benchmarking recently to look at that, and what does that look like from a workplace, you know, Salesforce sizing, structure, training, etc. I think that's critically important that we understand as an industry how we can best be positioned to address the needs going forward. I think that's critically important. And I'll add on to Brian's piece about the data. You know, we've talked about data a lot. I think where we get stuck sometimes, and I saw the question about value-based outcomes, is not agreeing on what the definition of value actually is. And so I think it's critical that we are able to measure that value, particularly when we're bringing such innovative and transformative medicines to the market. So ensuring that we do have platforms in place to measure that data and measure that value going forward. And that's when I think we can come to the table together to agree on these value-based outcomes.
Yeah, wonderful. And, you know, Eileen, because now we bring it back to the patient here, and we think about where this is going. You know, the current Canadian approach, in terms of one of the questions came in to say, DTC doesn't truly consider the widespread usage of the internet that most patients do tend to rely on. When we think about, you know, Marissa's comments and Brian's comments around this system level topics that we have in front of us, does it seem like the patient is at a disadvantage here?
Well, I think it's very difficult for patients because the information is coming at them from different angles. I mean, Marissa and Brian, you'd be much closer to this than me and you too, Ben. I just know that in my interactions with friends and colleagues, many of whom are very bright, they seem very confused by the information coming their way. So query, what do we do to ensure that patients have confidence in the information that is coming their way? When we look at, for example, intellectual property, which is a different issue, of course, than what we're speaking about today, you know, this is a time where, in a way, pharma should be the darling of people, what they've done to come to the table. And instead, the communication coming out of the media is, let's set aside IP rights, compulsory licensing, let's bring that back for Canada. And so I'll have communications from friends who'll say, isn't this great for Canada? So, my concern is that information is coming at consumers from so many different sources. And what can consumers rely on for an accurate source of information?
Yeah, fair points. Marissa, Brian, anything to add there?
Well, I just add that the border between Canada and the rest of the world is becoming increasingly virtual in the environment where we are, and so I think consumers, healthcare professionals, they're getting information from not just Canadian sources. It's coming globally, and so I do think there needs to be a little bit more consistency and thought about the fact that information is coming from all over the world. And we've watched this too. I think here in Canada, we look at the vaccination rates in the UK, we look at the vaccination rates in the US, and we're curious, why is it this way there, or why is it that way there? And there's increased interest. And so the idea that we can control communications within our geographic borders, I think, is a thing of the past.
Yeah. Marissa, any final words there?
Yeah, I think this is where, we have a great opportunity to partner, whether it be with patient associations and generating education materials. I think the value of our cross-functional partners, such as our medical teams as well, to really ensure that the information that's being provided to healthcare providers is objective. It tends to be, if it comes from pharma, there's some level of suspicion around it. And I think really building that trust and having that relationship with our healthcare providers, because we have great relationships with them and they rely on us for objective, evidence-based information around our products and around disease states. And we generate a lot of really meaningful information. So I think that's a key area that we need to continue to reinforce going forward.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, listen, I know we're coming up on time, but thanks for your leadership, your thought leadership today. Thanks for sharing tough questions. We're dealing with some tough ideas in industry and in the health system these days. So appreciate you sharing your thoughts, and thanks for continuing to lead in industry yourself.
Thanks for having us here.
Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, Mitch, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, so typical, just when the conversation starts to get good, the man in the tie shows up to shut everything down. Brian, Eileen, Melissa, Ben, that was a fantastic job, a great discussion. I'll quickly take care of the housekeeping tasks and we can all get down to the serious business of making ourselves lunch. Remember that if you have any questions that didn't get answered, you'll have a second chance to submit them next week through the NPC podcast with Peter Brenders and the NPC Health Biz Weekly e-newsletter. So the conversation will continue. You can get both the newsletter and the podcast for free from the NPC website. That's at pharmacongress.info. And I'm going to invite you right now to come back and see us again in about 6 weeks at the NPC Summer Webinar. Save the date. It's Wednesday, June 22nd at 11 a.m. This time, bring your colleagues along as well. Subject is going to be pharma's post-COVID countdown as we get closer to whatever it is that's going to be following this long worldwide nightmare. The invited panelists are Melissa Kumi from Gilead Sciences, Brian Canestraro from Intercept Pharmaceuticals, and the inimitable Ronnie Miller from Roche Canada. So save the date in your Google Calendar and watch for details. In closing, I want to thank Pangaea Consultants, our great partners, Ben and that associate that he's trying to break in, a promising young fellow named Joseph Knott, I think it was. Special thanks to our team at Chronicle Companies, Alan, Deeran, Jeremy, Kylie, Catherine, Aria, John, Nick, and Kathy. You are a well-oiled machine. Once again, I'm proud to be associated with our partner groups, AmReach, Healthing.ca, Imprez, Odea, Peak Pharma Solutions, Pharma Consultants, and Torys LLP. Speaking of the latter, if you found Eileen McMahon's talk of interest, you may want to check out Chronicle Academy's certificate level online course, on mastering DTC strategies for pharma. There's an incredible faculty led by Dr. Shafiq Qadri, Professor David Creeling of the University of Wisconsin, and many of the thought leaders from among our pharma colleagues. And as an NPC delegate, you get to enroll at the discounted rate of $99. So check it out at dtc.chronicle.academy, DTC Chronicle Academy. So that's it for today. Thanks again for spending some of your morning with us. Hope we'll see you soon. And in the meantime, please stay safe out there. Bye for now.